At 5 a.m., the
I'm
world was
so glad you
supposed to
could
be
make
quiet.
it. I've been looking forward
No
to this evening
calls.
all week.
No emails. No emergencies. That's what I kept telling myself as I stood in my tiny apartment kitchen, half awake, coffee shaking in my hand. Then came the knock. Not loud. Not urgent. Just slow, deliberate, like whoever stood outside knew I would open the door no matter what. I checked my phone. No messages. No missed calls. When I opened the door, my breath caught in my throat. It was her. My CEO. The woman whose name silenced boardrooms. The woman who had fired people with a single look. She stood there barefoot, hair loose, eyes red like she hadn't slept in days. Her coat was thrown over a wrinkled dress, and for the first time since I had known her, she looked small. She didn't say my name. She just whispered, "I didn't know where else to go." That sentence alone felt heavier than any performance review, any late-night deadline, any pressure she had ever put on me at work. I stepped aside without thinking. She walked in slowly, as if afraid I might change my mind. When the door closed behind her, the silence screamed. This was wrong. Dangerous. Unprofessional. And yet, I couldn't look away. She sat on the edge of my couch, hands clenched together, staring at the floor like it might open and swallow her whole. I asked if she wanted water. She shook her head. Coffee. She nodded. When I handed her the mug, our fingers brushed, and she flinched. That scared me more than anything. "I finalized the divorce last night," she said quietly. No tears. No drama. Just facts. But her voice cracked on the last word. I didn't know what to say. I had seen her husband once at a company gala, perfect smile, perfect suit, perfect life. At least, that's what it looked like from the outside. She laughed then. Tonight, there was no laughter. She stared into the coffee like it held answers. "Everyone thinks I'm strong," she continued. "They think I won. But I lost something I can't get back." Her shoulders shook. Just once. Then again. I sat beside her, close enough to feel the warmth she tried so hard to hide. She told me things she had never said out loud. How the marriage died quietly. How success made her lonely. How people only wanted the title, the money, the power. "No one stays," she whispered. "They just take." That's when she looked at me. Not as an employee. Not as a subordinate. But as a man. As a human being. "I'm so tired of being alone," she confessed. My heart pounded so loud I was sure she could hear it. This wasn't just a late-night breakdown. This was a confession that could destroy both of us. That I wanted to stop her. I wanted to protect us both. But she leaned closer, her voice barely audible. "Tell me," she said, "what it's like to be chosen without conditions." And in that moment, I realized this story wasn't about power or hierarchy anymore. It was about two broken people standing at the edge of something irreversible. If you're feeling this tension, this emotional pull, pause for a second and subscribe to the channel, because what happens next changes everything. Chapter 2. She stayed. Not because I asked her to. Not because she begged. She stayed because the sun came up and neither of us moved. Morning light spilled through the curtains, exposing everything we had tried to hide in the dark. She stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the city wake up beneath her. "I built an empire," she said softly, "but I never built a home." Those words hit harder than her tears. I told her she didn't have to explain herself to me. She smiled sadly. "That's the problem," she replied. "No one ever lets me explain. They just assume I'm fine." She talked about the nights she worked until exhaustion because silence scared her. About how her husband stopped touching her long before the lawyers got involved. About how loneliness feels worse when you're surrounded by people. I listened. That was all she needed. Not solutions. Not advice. Just someone who didn't interrupt. When she finished, she looked lighter, like she had finally put down something heavy she'd been carrying for years. Then she asked a question that changed the air between us. Do you ever feel invisible? I laughed bitterly. I told her how many times I'd been overlooked, underestimated, treated like I was replaceable. She nodded slowly. I see you, she said. And somehow, those 3 words shattered every wall I had. We crossed a line that morning, not physically, but emotionally. Something far more dangerous. When she reached for my hand, it wasn't desire that guided her. It was fear. And trust. I squeezed back, knowing full well what this could cost me. At work, she was still my CEO. Outside those walls, she was a woman learning how to breathe again. Before she left, she turned at the door and said, "Last night saved me." I didn't answer. I just watched her walk away, knowing nothing would ever be the same. Weeks passed. At the office, our eyes met across conference tables, emails, and meetings. No one noticed. But everything was different. She stood taller. Spoke softer. Smiled genuinely. One evening, she stopped by my desk and said quietly, "Thank you for not leaving when I needed someone the most." That was all. No promises. No expectations. Just gratitude. And somehow, that meant more than any grand declaration. If you believe emotional connections can be stronger than power, if you believe some confessions come at exactly the right time, then subscribe to this channel, because some stories don't end here. They grow. And this one has only just begun. The rumor didn't start loud. Rumors never do. They begin as a glance held a second too long, a silence that feels heavier than words, a name mentioned twice in a hallway. I felt it before I heard it. People at work started treating me differently. Not openly. Just, carefully. As if I were something fragile or dangerous. She, my CEO, kept her distance. Professionally perfect. Ice calm. Untouchable. But sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, her eyes found mine, and in them was a quiet storm she refused to let spill. That I told myself that morning at 5 a.m. was a closed chapter. A moment of weakness. A one-time confession born from pain and exhaustion. But life doesn't work that way. Once someone lets you see the truth behind their armor, you can't unsee it. I noticed the way she stopped staying late every night. The way her voice softened when she spoke to people. The way she no longer flinched at silence. And I knew, some part of her had healed. And some part of that healing had my fingerprints on it. Then one evening, she asked me to stay back after a board meeting. Not by message. Not by email. She said it out loud, in front of everyone, her tone neutral. "Can you stay for a moment?" My heart sank. The room emptied. The door closed. And suddenly, it was just us again, 2 people pretending the past didn't exist. She stood by the window like she had in my apartment weeks ago. "I need to say something," she said. Not as my boss. As a woman who had been holding her breath for too long. "I can't pretend that night didn't matter," she admitted. "But I also won't cross lines that destroy you." That was the first time anyone in power had ever said something like that to me. I told her I didn't regret being there for her. I told her I never expected anything in return. She turned to face me then, her eyes wet but steady. "That's exactly why it scares me," she said. Because for the first time, she was seen without being wanted for what she could give. The pressure came from outside. Whispers. Speculation. An anonymous complaint filed with HR, not naming names, but heavy with implication. I was called in for a routine conversation. They asked careful questions. I gave careful answers. The truth, trimmed of emotion. Nothing improper. Nothing provable. And yet, I knew how these stories usually ended. Not in justice, but in quiet sacrifice. I was prepared for it. She was not. The next morning, she called an executive meeting. No warning. No agenda. She stood at the head of the table and spoke with a calm that silenced the room. If anyone here believes success gives them the right to gossip, manipulate, or destroy reputations, she said, you're free to leave this company today. No one moved. Integrity is not optional, she continued. And neither is respect. I understood then, she wasn't protecting herself. She was protecting me. And that choice cost her more courage than any merger or deal she had ever signed. After that, we didn't meet alone for a while. Boundaries were rebuilt. Carefully. Painfully. But something stronger replaced the tension: trust. Real trust. One night, months later, she sent me a message. Just 4 words, "Are you still here?" I replied instantly. I always was. She didn't come to my door this time. She didn't need to. Some connections don't require proximity. They exist in loyalty. In silence. In choosing not to walk away. That if you're still listening to this story, it means you understand something important, that not all love stories begin with desire. Some begin with empathy. With staying when it's easier to leave. Subscribe to this channel if you believe the strongest bonds are built in moments no one else sees. Because this story isn't about scandal. It's about what happens when 2 people choose dignity over fear, and how that choice changes everything.